Welcome to Kathryn Raaker's World. Innovation, culture, adventure, fashion and health, artists, destinations, traditions. This is Kathryn Raaker's World.
Hi, this is Kathryn Raaker of Kathryn Raaker's World, and I have the honor of having on our show today Gerald Everett Jones, and I'm going to tell our viewers, our listeners, a little bit about him, and that is that he is a freelance writer who lives in Santa Monica, California. Harambee's Kenya Sundowner is his 11th novel. He's a member of the Writers Guild of America and the Dramatists Guild, the Women's National Book Association, the Independent or Film Independent Find, as well as director of the Independent Writers of Southern California. He holds a Bachelor of Arts with honors from the College of Letters, Wesleyan University, where he studied under novelist Peter Boynton, F.D. Reeve, and Jerry Konosky. And, you know, you can always go to his website at geraldeverettjones.com to get as much information as you possibly could want, because he's awesome. And I'm really excited about having him back on our show today. So, I want to welcome you to the show to start off with. And
thank you, Kathryn, for having me back.
You're always an exciting person to interview. And my first question is, this is your 11th novel. Is this your favorite?
You know, in many ways, I think it is, because even though this is literary fiction, it is, I won't say autobiographical, because every writer uses pieces of his own life and others, and your friends and neighbors say, why did you write about me? I mean, everybody's seeing themselves in what you do often. But my wife Georgia and I spent 2 years in Kenya while she was involved in wildlife conservation and child welfare. And she'd been an activist for years, and we made many trips, safaris and other jogs to Africa. I think we'd been 7 times. And she, one morning, just said, I'm going to have to be in Africa to do some of the things I want to do. And I said, well, if they have an internet connection, I can write from anywhere. And I did. So, Harambee's Kenyan Sundowner, which is this book, is the story of, and the main character, Harry Gardner, he only gets the nickname Harambee later. I'll explain why. But the main character, Harry Gardner, I made him a widower because, well, I didn't want there to be a wife character. Well, I just dodged that bullet. Okay. So anyway, maybe that's too much information, but this is about a lonely fellow who is something of a couch potato. It's late in his life. He kind of feels like his life is over. And then one day, a friend introduces him to this slick Italian tour operator, Aldo Barbieri. And Aldo says, my friend, how'd you like to have a life? You're playing golf, you're going to bridge parties, you're getting setups on dates that you don't want. Why don't you just go with me to Africa? And you'll have all the drinks, all the food you want, and frankly, you'll have all the women you want. And Harry thinks, well, that's probably not for him, but hey, might as well try. And he goes with Aldo, and very rapidly, I mean, within a few days, and he realizes that the life that Aldo has described for prominent people of net worth, who can basically buy their way into just about anything, Harry realizes that indeed this isn't for him. So he's about ready to pack it up and go home. And yet he's in the supermarket in this little beach town on the white sands of the Indian Ocean, and he meets a middle-aged Kenyan woman, and she's a widow, and they kind of hit it off. Well, the thing is, and this is the engine of the book, I'm not giving too many spoilers away here. The thing is that once he takes up with her, it turns out she has a rather colorful past. At least 2 husbands, a couple of teenage children who are in boarding school in Nairobi and doesn't know anything about them. But also she seems to be kind of involved with some movers and shakers who are, well, they're into charities and philanthropies, but maybe those are not really what they say they are. And if you live in this part of the world, and I know, Kathryn, some of this bumps up against experiences you've had. Harry's basic issue, the thing that he has to wrestle with is, am I being played? Now, if you live in Kenya, I would imagine in perhaps East Africa or maybe other places in the world, you can tell me. But in Kenya especially, even brothers, siblings, people who love each other are fond of playing one another. Okay, this is the place where if you don't repay that $50 that I loaned you, you could probably find all of your tires have no air in them, or maybe one morning there are no sheets on your bed and they've been burned in the backyard. It just, and you don't, this is not a grudge that you carry. This is just part of the transactional part of daily life. And so Harry has to ask himself, well, even if I'm being played, do I care? I'm kind of having a good time. He got his life back. So, but the thing is that, and one of the things that makes this book, I think, quite relevant is Kenya is going to have their national elections in August. And the last time they had national elections, the fellow who lost said that the election was rigged and that he actually had won. And he held rallies with an alternative swearing-in ceremony. Is this beginning to sound familiar? And the fellow who was in charge of the vote counting, which was done by computer, was found slain. Okay. Then, since that time, the fellow who had protested the election was invited back into the parliamentary government, and he became quite powerful, quite influential. And actually, in the next election, he's the prominent candidate for election for president now, because the old president Uhuru is going to presumably retire. We wonder whether he will. He'll be behind the scenes, as are some of the other prominent families. But certainly Harry, needless to say, without giving too much more of the plot away, Harry has to confront this whole world of not only corruption in Kenya, but also international finance, gray money.
And I'd like to ask you a question here, if you don't mind.
Well, yes, far away.
That is, yes, it sounds very much like what's going on in the United States right now. And, the scary part of it is when did you write this in relationship to what's going on here in the States?
I wrote about half of this when I was living in Kenya. We were living in Diani Beach on the ocean. We had lived in Nairobi for a couple of months to kind of get our paperwork in order. But we lived most of the time in Diani Beach, which is a small resort town, quite a few luxury resorts. There are quite a few, the Kenyans would say mzungus, rich white, Europeans, Americans. And I draw that distinction because it's not really colonial culture. That's kind of so yesterday. There really aren't. There isn't really a colonial class there these days. The visiting foreigner is usually regarded as a wonderful prospect as a business partner or as a tourist who spends a lot of money. So you tend to be treated like royalty when you go. But to get back to your question, we came back right before COVID hit. And I often joke sardonically that we came back because things got interesting in Kenya. Well, things got a whole lot more interesting here. And then COVID broke out. And when I finished the book, it took me a few more months to finish the manuscript. The pandemic was underway. And I did then go back into the book, and I used the onset of COVID in Kenya as one of the inciting incidents that helps the plot resolve. So actually, the pandemic is organic to this plot. And it wasn't the way I started out, because as I've often shared with you, I don't write to outlines. I just kind of write where the characters want to go. And that way I believe my plots aren't predictable, and there's a lot of nice surprises. Because if I can surprise myself, then hopefully I can please the reader. But yes, the onset of the pandemic creates the situation that causes Harry to decide, am I committed? Am I a visitor or am I a resident? Am I committed or am I not?
Okay, so here's the next one. Why do Western philanthropies persist in thinking they need to fix Africa? Why don't they fix our country first?
Well, that is if you will, that's the main holdover from colonialism, which goes back. I mean, European colonialism goes back to the 19th century. The use of Africa as a place to exploit goes back a couple of thousand years to the Arab sea traders. Okay, so slavery didn't begin with the Europeans. It began, before the birth of Christ, with Arabs sending slaves to India and China. So I think that a lot of it, I think originally it was a colonialist impulse. The British government was there originally, British enterprise was there originally in the late 1800s to build a railway, primarily between Mombasa and Nairobi, and then potentially on to Uganda and Rwanda and the Congo. The idea was to be able to pull resources out of those inner countries, ship them by rail to Mombasa, and then of course they would be shipped to the British Empire in India and the burgeoning, markets in places like Singapore and Hong Kong. The problem was that private railroad project went bankrupt, and the British government came in and said, something, this is so strategically important, we're just going to take it over. And that was the real beginning of the British not being able to pull out of there, even after it wasn't necessarily in their interest. And along with that then came the missionaries. And the Kenyans decided that missionaries were kind of good for business. And the Kenyan law to this day provides, the immigration laws, but if you put missionary on there, you're in, kid. And the thing that's really strange about odd, interesting about living in Kenya as a tourist.
Can we do that when we come back from?
Oh, certainly, yeah, no, but I it'd be interesting to tell you about what's going on in Kenya, just in terms
let's,
of the missionaries.
let's talk about that on our next segment because we have to take a short break for our sponsors. And we'll be right back after these important messages on Kathryn Raaker's World with Gerald Everett Jones and his new book, Harambee's Kenya Sundowner. Did I get that right? Just say it for me.
We'll talk about that after the break.
All right. Okay, so we'll be right back on Kathryn Raaker's World. We'll be right back. We are back on Kathryn Raaker's World, which I'm really excited about having the guest that we have today, and that is the famous Gerald Everett Jones in his 11th novel. And we're talking about that, and we're talking now about the missionaries in Africa, which we know from every faith out there have missionaries in Africa. Am I correct?
Well, what I discovered to my surprise was I assumed, because I know a little bit of the colonialist history, that these missionaries would be British Anglican, Episcopal, or Catholic. And the thing that really stunned me was Kenya is about 80% Christian, 20% Muslim. In the interior, on the coast where I lived, it's actually the reverse. It's about 80% Muslim, 20% Christian. But the Christians in Africa are predominantly evangelicals. They are like American Pentecostals. And those have actually been the most active missionaries. And one of the things that really struck me was they have these congregations, thousands of people for a worship service. I mean, huge warehouses. They and just the most incredible gospel music. Some of it inspired by reggae, some of it South African, but these are joyous choirs, okay, jumping up and down. All the time I was there, and I was raised as a Southern Baptist, nobody ever walked up to me and said, "Do you know Jesus is your personal savior?" There was not a single Kenyan who ever talked to me about their faith. And yet, those were some of the kindest people I have ever met. Those were people who were living whatever faith it was that they had found. Now, the flip side of that is that Kenyans do seem to have this sense of God is Santa Claus. Okay, it's like if you want a new car, pray. And the example that I give is I was sitting in one of the dining halls, and they had the television on, and I was having breakfast on a Sunday morning, and so they had a gospel show on, and they're running a ticker along the bottom of the screen, and it's the prayer requests. And one of the prayer requests is, "My son has his exams tomorrow. Please pray for a B-." And I thought, wait, you're praying to the creator of the universe for a B-, which is that all he can manage for? Well, number one, that was kind of whimsical, but I thought, all right, if the kid deserves a B-, he'll get a B-. Prayer really shouldn't be a part of this. So I say that to my, in a lighthearted way to my Kenyan friends. But I did want to share with you, yes, from a serious standpoint, the reason the philanthropies are there and they are so strong. And there's actually a nonfiction book that's written about this that I only discovered in my research coming back. But this researcher, this college professor, confirmed in her research all the things that I had discovered just in my casual observation. And that book is called Germans on the Kenyan Coast by Nina Berman. And especially on the coast, because it is primarily Muslim, and the Kenyan government especially since independence in the 60s, is the controlling families all are at least they say they're Christian. The coast has been neglected, and that goes all the way back to the British. And so what's happened is the coast became a very popular place for vacationers, especially Germans and Italians. In fact, supposedly when the Italian mafiosi got kind of kicked out of Rome, they decided they wanted to make Diani Beach and some of those other towns south of Mombasa, their Miami Beach. This was going to be the gambling center of Africa. And somehow the Italians got chased off. One might say the corrupt Kenyans didn't want to share. I really don't know. I think that might be another book. But seriously, when the rich white folks came in, the ones who wanted to stay because it cost only a fraction to live a life of luxury compared to other places, as it does in other parts of the world, there were no private schools. There were no public schools to speak of. There were no hospitals, no clinics, no public services. So what these colonialists did is they brought in philanthropies to establish schools, hospitals, clinics, public services. All right. Well, when the government saw this, they go, who needs public schools? They've got what they want.
Right.
So you've got an underclass that are the people who bus your tables, cook your food, might be your household help, because nobody's got a washing machine, even in the big houses. It's all done by hand mostly. Those people may really have challenges sending their kids to school because, yes, there are public schools now. Public education up to a certain grade is quote unquote free, but they must buy their textbooks with cash. They must buy mandatory uniforms with cash. And so that's still a barrier for the poorest children, just simply don't manage to go to school in general. So there's the answer to your question. That's the reason the philanthropies are still there. For example, the big hospital chain in Nairobi and where I live in Diani Beach, and presumably in other parts of Kenya, the Aga Khan Hospital. Okay, that's where that money came from. So, and those are good quality hospitals. But of course, they also serve a Muslim community, and there is a very prominent stratum of society that is shop owners who are of Indian descent, of Arab descent, and again, if there are some dynamics of racism, here in Los Angeles, there's something of a ongoing resentment of Korean shop owners by Latinx neighborhoods, and that's kind of what you have going on in Kenya. And so yes, it's a very complicated situation, but also a philanthropy can be a conduit for cash. And in this world of now we're getting into Bitcoin and certainly international gray money has been there, for forever. But when Barack Obama gave his last speech, it was in his administration, it was to the UN General Assembly, and the theme of that speech was the underground economy. And he said, there's $11 trillion in the underground economy washing around the world, and we can't track a penny of it. Well, I did some research, and the entire world economy at that time was only $80 trillion. You're talking about more than a tenth of the world economy. Is we've got no idea whose money that is or what it's buying.
And we don't know who has it. So I just want you to tell us where we can purchase the book, where we can get all of your books, and are you going to do an audiobook at all?
The answer to the first question is all my books are on Amazon, and I believe all of them are on barnesandnoble.com as well as, most booksellers. And GeraldEverettJones.com. Let's see my name here.
And we love that book
with the two T's. Yeah, we can talk about that one too. This is the Evan Wycliffe mystery series, the Preacher series. GeraldEverettJones.com. Actually, if you go there, you can download a complimentary copy of the first book in that mystery series, Preacher Finds a Corpse. And so, yes, that's how to reach me. And then there was one other thing you asked me.
Yeah, I'm thinking about it.
We get so wrapped up, but yes, that's the place to go. And I have a regular blog called the Thinking About Thinking series. And I talk not only about my books, but I talk about books that intrigued me, and they not necessarily recent releases, but maybe even some classics, maybe, Stendhal's Red and the Black from 1814. And how did that have to do with the fuse between?
Do you want to do a regular television show, Gerald? Are you doing one?
I am doing, I'm doing GMAP TV every Friday at 3 p.m. Central.
So we need to say goodbye for this edition. And I want to thank you for joining me. Don't go anywhere. I want to thank you for joining me today on Kathryn Raaker's World. It'll be on all of our television networks that we are part of. And so anyhow, and then I'm doing a radio show with you next. So I'm very excited. So let's say goodbye and give your website one more time, please.
That would be Gerald Everett Jones, Gerald with a G, Gerald Everett with two T's, Jones.com. And as I say on that landing page, get your electronic copy of Preacher Finds a Corpse, and that'll hook you on. There's 3 books in that series. Perhaps some more to come. We can talk about those too.
Okay. Thank you so much for joining me on Kathryn Raaker's World. Don't forget to go to our website at KathrynRaakersWorld.com. We're on everything, every social media now. You can see our television programs, including Facebook. I don't believe it, but we've done it. Got a new media kit out, so you got to check that out. So we'll see you soon. Take care and have a wonderful day. Thank you.
So long.